Good morning, good morning. Welcome to Addicted Kids, Concerned Parents. I'm Ed Ratush, and I'm waiting to be joined by my co-host, Dr. Alex Welge. As I let him in, we'll figure out what we're going to talk about today. But it's going to have to do with addiction in the family and how to manage. Hi, there you are.
There we are. Is this better than last time? I hope.
It looks good to me. Nice and
Okay.
clear.
I had a big delay last time. I couldn't get, I don't know what happened, but
No, we're on. We're on. I was just very kind of casually, slowly introducing that this is Addicted Kids Concerned Parents, and that you and I are going to figure out what to talk about, but it will be on the topic of the family and addiction. Um, did we have an idea? We
I was
lost
thinking
out.
Portugal. Well, we kind of talked about this. We hinted at this in one of the earlier meetings. I'm not sure if you'd want to talk about it today, but maybe the differences in approach to from Portugal, for example, versus the Philippines being the exact opposite. Hey, Antoinette.
Hi,
Hi,
doctors.
hi. Yeah. Okay. So, uh, 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 talking about the different approaches to addiction, culturally, internationally, across nations, across cultures. That's an interesting thought. Yeah, because we were talking about like harm reduction in particular, and parts of the
Exactly.
world that have had harm reduction. Antoinette, what do you think about like addiction and um, like you know just anything? Like when the word addiction, what do you think of?
Well, number one, I have three boys that I'm raising. So, of course, as a parent, you want to make sure you are providing a safe environment, a clean environment, so they don't grow up and navigate toward drugs, alcohol addiction. I was going to actually ask, being a parent, like, how do you, with I have a teenager now. How do you encourage your teenage son to not hang out with the crowd that wants to, experiment with alcohol and pot or, just because, of course, starting, at such a young age, that could lead to addiction in adult life. And I don't want to be the nagging mom, but at the same time, I want to encourage, do a healthy, positive encouragement, and at the same time, just kind of, you know, not protect and just, hold like where they can't go out the house ever. But at the same time, how do you balance that, to keep them from engaging in drugs and alcohol?
You're like a ringer. That's an awesome question, Antoinette. You articulated so many valuable concerns and points. At first, I was thinking just about the dangers of what's out there for teens and even preteens as they walk the streets with their friends safely in safe neighborhoods. But there's advertisements in bodegas for things like kratom that could be added to your smoothie as an enhancement,
Yeah.
as something that will benefit them. And I'm thinking like, wow, the kratom, that's an opioid that will potentially be as problematic as oxycodone. And it's right there being offered to everyone, but particularly people for who that offering is such a novel thing. You know, you could add CBD to your smoothie, or you could add
Mhm.
kratom, add both.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's still legal in so many places. Like in New Jersey, obviously, it must be legal because these are advertisements like right there in the window. And I've had so many people ask me about their use of it, and very casually. And when I tell them how dangerous I think it is, they think I'm putting them on because, well,
Mhm.
but I could just order it online. So are you sure, Doc? You
Mhm.
know, that it can't be that dangerous and that available. So that was the first thought I had when you started talking about your son, was like the fact that there's just legal, super dangerous stuff being directly advertised to him, right? That's one element of it.
Yeah.
Um, the other kind of continuing part of this uh, uh, is, you know, friends. Like you want your child to have friends. You want them to have connections,
Yeah.
right? And how do you interfere with the connectedness component? You, you know, that's a big deal. And, but is it possible that he's making friends and connections with people that might be difficult to live a healthy life adjacent to? That's also possible. So you have to be like really honest with yourself. Is this a friend that's gonna be a good friend for my son and
Mhm.
a guide in troubling times as opposed to something else? Um, there's a fear sometimes, I think, and this will be the last thing I say about this, and I'll hand it off to you, Alex. But there's a fear sometimes I have, I think parents have about, and I guess I'm projecting, maybe myself, about like, you want to stay liked by your kids. And you end up making compromises in your decisions in an effort to stay liked. And I think
Yes.
the alternative is probably the healthier, which is try to funnel your kids into the direction so that you could continue to like them,
That's
you
good.
know,
Hmm.
right? Because if you like them, you want to hang out with them and you're going to give them love, you're going to give them your
Yeah.
energy. But if you have a kid that you have a difficulty wanting to be around, that's a kid that's going to be going in a troubled way. Um, so I'll hand off on that.
Yeah, that's really really
That
important.
was great. Thank you.
Very, very well said. I think, Antoinette, I think, thank you for that question. That's a great question. We've talked about this as well, with respect to um, basically being there and having that line of communication, right? And and making sure your child knows, hey, this is a big world. There's going to be lots of things going on your way, lots of things coming your way. I want you to know that I'm always going to be here to help you work through it, figure things out, because it's pretty crazy. I know when I was in high school, you could just relay your experience. I know people were bringing all sorts of things my way when I was in high school, and yeah, I was just thinking, Ed, we could present, having that conversation early with your child, even before they go into high school, sometimes even before middle school now, and just be like, you know what? I know you're going to come across all sorts of stuff. I just want you to know I'm right here to help you work through it, because some of the stuff I just learned about, like I just heard about kratom the other day, you could tell them. I mean, it's weird. I mean, I never had to deal with this, but I know you're going to have to deal with it. But maybe we can work with it together. Something happens, just some weird question somebody has, somebody wants to push you to try something. Don't be afraid to come to me and we'll work through it. Kratom, I mean, it's like people are getting it from, I don't even know if, this is true, but from what I heard, it was like, it's an opioid, mitragynine, and they're getting it as a way to come off of heroin from Thailand, and they're getting it mailed into their post office from Thailand, and then there's this big, opioid warning from the FDA. Hey, people are dying because it's not clearly being regulated. People are getting E. coli infections from this thing that's not being regulated from Thailand, and it's supposed to help you get off of opioids, but it itself is an opioid. Now you're going to be stuck on that, But just telling your patient, your children,
Even
This stuff is out there.
it's
I know.
supposed to help people get off of opioids. Like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's how they're being marketed to these
Well,
people,
look,
you know?
I'll put it this way. If you have high dose heroin addiction and now you're cold turkey and all you have is a bunch of kratom to chew on, you're going to have to chew through a pound and plus of kratom. And that's not an easy thing to get down. So to be able to not be sick, yeah, sure, you could help someone getting off of heroin going to nothing. Magical thing to chew on, sure, absolutely, because it's an opioid. It's like
Mhm.
probably there's probably byproducts before you get to heroin where you only modify the opioid flower a little bit, and you could probably use that to get off of heroin, because it won't be as potent. But that's clinically not a successful strategy. And so
Right.
it's just like fortunate successful marketing to get a lot of people experimenting with kratom. I,
Yeah.
a whole lot of people are experimenting with kratom. Like
A lot of people.
and because now it's in places where you could just add it to things like, it's like a bee pollen extract, the way people add that. Or,
Mm.
let me get a caffeine espresso shot in that. It's like, wow. So yeah, so there's like there's these real dangers. Now, look, uh, my kid's only 4.5, but when he tries to drink the beer that I'm having, I tell him he can't have it, which of course makes him want it more, right? So I have to explain to him, well, what is this? Well, it's a type of beverage that, you know, adults drink, and it's not that great to drink, but daddy likes it sometimes. Uh, so even though it's not, so my son's like, is it healthy for you? Does it build muscles? And I'm like, not really, because I teach him to eat spinach and eggs and why that's a good idea. And so he's like, well, so it's not building muscles. So like, why are you doing it? So sometimes daddy does it just because he likes it and not because it's good for him. And you're right that that's not the best situation, but once in a while, that's the situation that we're in. But that's why it's important to eat the healthy food all the time and do healthy things all the time so that the once in a while that you do something that you know isn't so healthy, it's not that bad, right? So very basic kind of explanation of how to have a relative understanding of things we do because we like them versus things we should be doing because they're good for us on a regular basis, not even questioning whether we like them or not. You know, I didn't say, well, do you really love eating your spinach? I don't really care. I just explained to him that it's important that he does. And that it's a different kind of rationale for the experience, for the behavior, right? So if you, for example, enjoy a glass of wine, it's a great place to talk about that, because if you never say anything about your own, whether it's cigarette use or vaping or, uh, you
Mhm.
know, alcohol.
Yeah, my kids call my wine mommy juice. That's what I labeled it when they were little. So they're like, "Oh, what are you drinking?" "Oh, I'm having a glass of
That's right.
mommy juice."
So,
And
look,
they're not mommy, so they can't have any.
when I was a little boy, I loved the smell of my dad, and my dad smelled like grease from a machine shop, um, cigarettes, Old Spice cologne, and like maybe a shot of vodka. Uh,
Oh, wow.
and so I smelled them, and that's what I was attracted to because that's my dad. Like I didn't smell
Mm.
it and dissect it as like, well, my dad has some good behaviors and some questionable habits. I didn't break it down that way. Uh, that smell was this person I valued so much, and so as you grow, you are attracted to those things almost subconsciously, you know. Um, I my dad stopped smoking cigarettes when I was 11 due to my request, but I'm still attracted to all things smoking, like from cigars to pipes, cannabis, like there was a time I was even interested in cigarettes, and I really don't like the idea that anyone should smoke a cigarette, but like there's these cigarettes made by this company and they're oval, non-filtered, and there's no additives. And what a cool cigarette to have once in a while. Like, what a stupid thought. But like, I'm susceptible to marketing. I'm susceptible to the chemicals in these things that affect me in a way that, I might want to revisit. And you have to almost be honest about the fact that that's the environment that you're laying out for your kids, right? So what does that mean?
Exactly.
If I'm dishonest about it, like pretend like that's not how I behave, and just be like, you better not be drinking. If I hear you smoked, while for the last 4 years my kid's been finding my stash, quote unquote, that's really hypocritical. And the kid just basically goes like, Dad's a dick, right? I can't talk to him about this. Like, I should just go smoke a blunt with my friends. And he could be 13 when he's saying that. Because all he did is just wanted to know what the hell was going on. What's in that special wood box that you don't let me look at? It's a funny smell. I think I smelled that when we were hanging out with my friend's older brother. I think I know what it is, Daddy. Right? Like I'm literally remembering how the first time me and my friend found out that his dad smoked weed. You know what I mean? It was something like that, And we didn't even think that he smoked weed, even though his nickname was Smokey.
Oh boy, oh boy. Wow, that's too funny. That's really funny.
And then like when we came to, it's like my friend was so injured. He was like, oh, my dad's doing something illegal. I better not even talk about it because I don't want anyone from school to come and arrest them. Meanwhile, his dad became a dad when he was 15, which is like a whole different story. So this guy was like 28 with a 13-year-old son, and his 13-year-old son, even though they're so close in age, still can't talk to his dad because, like there's this divide, because there's secrecy, there's like things they don't talk about. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. I mean, you're making it. That's the way. If you're just real with them, hey, there's no reason to create barriers there, right? Like, that this is going to happen. It's just got to be real about it, because the battlefield that these children are going through now is even more intense than when we were growing up. But we got to be real. Like, they're going to go through this thing. This is sort of a cultural phenomenon here, and it goes culture by culture, right? In France, you might drink a glass of wine with your children at every meal from a young age, 15 years old or whatever. But in the U.S., we know our culture. We know that once we enter that high school arena, that's the thing. Everybody's going to be having access to all sorts of stuff, and we all go through this cultural growth period of kind of playing and being wild and free. All sorts of drugs come in and around us, and the kids are all going to be around this. And, back in the 70s, it might have just been, or who knows, it might have been more. I remember hearing a lot about LSD and PCP in some of the kids when they were younger. But in the 70s, 60s, who knows but now, it's stuff like kratom, like you brought up,
and lots of
marijuana is definitely there.
Lots of synthetics, right?
They're going to be going through this, and that's part of they want to be popular, they want to be cool, they want to be most of the kids are going to be partying, they're going to be sneaking out at night, finding ways to enjoy and try the stuff that they're not supposed to try, be bad, and be wild and free and crazy and whatever, It's all part of our culture. So we go through this rite of passage. And then who gets stuck are usually, like we talked about, people who have more dopamine response than the average person, right? But any behavior that you start to enjoy, and then it becomes hard to give up because you like it too much, you crave it too much, and now you're just not doing well in school. So if you've had that conversation early, you kind of set this tone that, look, I know you're going to be going through a minefield, and I'm going to be right here for you. We can figure this stuff out. Any question you have, let me know. But if you're in a bad place, you get yourself in trouble, I'm going to be there. Please call me. I want you to know that in the middle of the night you find yourself in a crazy situation, I'm going to be able to help you. But if we're going through this, you know, you might be learning stuff that I've never even seen. So don't be, you know, shocked that I won't know exactly what's going on, but we'll figure it out together. Because this is I mean, the level of opioid use, the level that is going on now, I could never imagine in my high school. We used, you know, I smoked pot, I drank, I snuck, you know, got in trouble. I had to be, you know, taken. I found myself in situations which it's embarrassing to say, right? But back then, you did it. You got in trouble. This is part of the rite of passage. Now, of course, we know a lot more. So I think we have to be realistic that our kids are going to go through this. We just got to be there to a degree, be their friend, but you're also the parent, right? You also have to make sure you're staying in that role too, because if you're going to become too much of a friend, you might end up
so here's the thought.
being too permissive.
There's a ratio with how much information, like, before you even get to that point, you know, I think the goal to some degree is to encourage transparency, right, in communication.
Right.
You know, how do you get a kid to transparently tell you about their day, what they're thinking, what they're feeling? You know, Cindy came up to me and she said she didn't like me anymore. I told her it hurt my feelings, and then I went to play with the blocks. You know, a child could tell you that when they're little, and then at some point a little bit later on in life, that, you know, that's not what they're talking to you about, and they need their diary under a lock and key. You know, so how do you encourage kids to want to be transparent with you? And I was thinking about that, and I was like, wow, there's probably a ratio with how many things you're willing to hear and bite your lip about and not say, so that the small percentage of time when you do say, they really hear you, right? Because there's a ratio, you know, and there's a whole lot of stuff you have to be able to willing to hear and not respond to, you know, to hear and not, you know, like, feel like you have to criticize, you know, because every time you criticize, you just like put, like, it's almost like a construction cone getting the pathway of conversation the next time. They know, I go there, she's going to tell me how wrong I am to have found the group of friends again. So it's like, you could still think it, but you don't want that to interfere with what you know about their lives. And again, like, I don't mean like be a private investigator because you're trying to figure out what's happening. No. Like, could you imagine if you live a life where you care that much about what's going on, right? Like, you're interested in them. And why? It's because you cared enough to guide them so that they grew up to be a person you still want to hang out with. Back to that point, because like ultimately, if you're going to want to hang out with them, other people are going to want to hang out with them. And again, this goes back to last week's conversation, even the week prior. It's, if addiction is crudely defined as a condition of a poverty of connections, then helping build human beings that are easy to connect to is one way to describe the role of the parent who cares about making kids that won't become addicted.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's so well said. You know, I mean, it's about that that process, because if they know, you know, okay, you're in a family, you've got four children, you and your husband, just for example, you have three boys, like I think you were saying, right, Antoinette? And
Yes.
each one of them has their own personality, and you have an individual relationship with each one of them, and you're getting to know each one, they get to know you, and you've got this bonding that's going on throughout. And they're going through some tough times, but they maybe haven't gone through some hard times yet, or maybe they have. But they've seen you go through it, like Ed described, with his father, and he saw what happened to Dad, but then he also saw Dad got through it, and it just like gave him so much, of this thing in his head that he knows that, okay, if I go through it too, I'm also going to come out the other side eventually. And if you've got this kind of bonding there, I think that's the thing that's going to save that child ultimately, because the child will come back to you when things are going wrong. It's not going to have to deal with it alone. It's the loneliness, I think, that's the painful part in our culture, who has become so lonely, and people have become so separated, and two children, parents are working, and nobody's around to guide you, and they don't know where to turn. Sure, somebody will fill that void. Somebody, and there's a lot of money to be made off of kids' impulses. There's all sorts of people that are going to be pulling that child in one way or the other all the time. But they have you to come back to. That's what's going to sustain them. I think what's happening in a lot of our Western societies, we put a lot of value on profit and productivity. We fell for that idea that we would make our lives better and our children's lives better in the future. But what ended up happening is now both of us are working. We've got more people working, but then they're getting half the pay. They can't make them. And in the end, the quality of life hasn't gotten a whole lot better, but the families have become more separated. Supply and demand, right? You got more workers now, so you don't have to pay them as much. And so in the end, that's happened. But the child isn't by itself. Like we talked about the identified patient, right? Eventually, when it gets to a boiling point, the child is the one that's going to show the symptoms. That's about the whole. But if the whole structure is a good whole, and you've got this core thing where the children are the center of your family once they become part of your family. And you've got that, everybody's pouring that love into this child throughout, and they know that they're going to have tough times in school, and they're going to come back. That coming back is what's important. The need for them to know they can come back, because otherwise they're not going to be able to take advantage of your strength. It's easier as a parent, see your child break down. It's better to have them break down while you're there to help them build them back up. It's better to be. So if you're there, you're going to give them the strength that you've learned on how to come back. Life will beat you down if you let it, but it's about how quickly you bounce back that's going to be important. It's about how resilient you are, right? And people will put all sorts of stuff in your head, but if you always react to what they're saying, and you don't stand up for what you are, then you're always living their life. You're not living your life. And you need to strengthen yourself and your being. And I'm going to help you be your best. And that's who I want to be. I'm proud of who you are. And, there's a process. We're all going to get beaten down. Me too. But I'm going to come back too. And this is what we learn, the resiliency. So I think, Ed, I'm going to hand it to you here. I think personally having that bonding be the strongest it can possibly be in the scenario that it is possibly in, but realizing that the more time you're taking away from the family, its ability to bond, the weaker the bonding energy of that family is as a concept. So we have to keep strengthening that bonding energy throughout the child's life, and then help the child bond in neighborhoods and make them stronger to their neighbors, make them bond better with the teacher, bond better with the pastor, bond better with the big brother, big sister, bond better with it's about this bonding ultimately. Then they don't need the drug ultimately, right? It's just part of this exploration. They might get fooled, but then, hey, I screw up, I'm going to come back and I'll be fine.
Exactly. I love that. I love how you both talked about being transparent. I think, and I'm honest. I'm honest with my boys. I get moody. I say, hey, I'm having a moment, and I think being honest and seeing how exactly what you said, how we deal with things that we go through in life and not shielding that from them, I think is also helpful. And, I share with my boys, I'm a control freak. I don't want to do anything that is controlling me. I want to stay away from things that will overtake, the wonderful gift of being in control of myself, of my life. And I love that helped me really a lot. Just being transparent and just
Mm.
being open, so they can see that we're not perfectionists. We don't always have it together. We don't always know what to do. So thank you for sharing that. That's
Absolutely.
super helpful.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's thank you for sharing your personal story. I was thinking about how many things that my parents did were wrong or bad in my development, but like uh, we were also a very kind of transparent family where we're very honest with one another, and there weren't really secrets about what's happening. Like if there was a problem that my father had at work, everybody knew about it. Like we were completely a family unit in what, at least with the language in the home, and there weren't secrecy and secret conversations, and it led to this weird need that I think everyone in my family and certainly me had to be compelled to share, particularly things that other people hide. So when I was experimenting with drugs in college, my parents were completely aware of my course of experimentation. I don't think they wanted to be, but I
Mm.
couldn't help but want to tell them. I wasn't going to listen to what they had to say about it because at the time I knew more about what I was experimenting with than they certainly did. My parents are significantly older than I am. They're like in their mid 80s now. So even
Oh, wow.
college, between them being immigrants and whatever, like they didn't have an opinion about MDMA in 1991. Like it wasn't going to be, but I did. I read the book like in chapters. So the point is, I didn't need their insight or opinion per se, but I needed them to hear my honesty. You know what I mean? And so it was an interesting kind of thing because it's not like I didn't feel like I needed them. I don't need them to help me make these decisions now, and I didn't think I needed them then. But I still love the fact that I don't have to ever hide anything from them. I could just talk about anything and everything from drugs to sex. And again, even though there's a big age difference, and my parents grew up at a time where you definitely don't talk that way. And I challenged them. I said, listen, you had me at an older age, and it's a different time, but it is what it is. Do you want a relationship that's honest or not? Because an honest one, you might hear things you don't want to hear. If you want to
Yes.
just be the respected parents that I treat properly and in the public uh, circle, everyone, you know, respects you for being excellent and they only hear positive things I have to say, I could do that, but then that's all we're going to have. Or you could have everything, which means a real
Mhm.
relationship with now someone who's an adult. You made this adult, but now I'm an adult, and we have this opportunity to still grow who we are with one another. Like, I don't know why I knew that I wanted that, but I knew that I,
Mm.
and so
Mhm.
I pushed
That's amazing.
like from an early age, 18, 19, 20, to hear things that they didn't want to hear from whether it was my politics or to my experimentation or whatever, uh, and to figure out how to have a relationship with me as a person who is no longer under their control in any way other than you know so
Yeah.
it's a
You have.
powerful thing to teach the freedom of honesty and transparency.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, and it's a beautiful thing. That's also what makes you profound. You know, when you really are able to deeply and honestly into things, you go deeper in places where you may not go if you're always living a superficial existence. You know, you're never really going to get to the bottom of things. That's you're learning, you're taught your parents and things that they didn't know. You know, they grew from you, and that made the unit stronger. And it's kind of this. That's a concept I guess I'm beginning to value as we. That's the cohesion that's held together. That's, if you look at it as physical forces, that bonding energy, versus when the child is by itself and it feels that it doesn't have that bond, then it's more likely to bond with something else or bond externally because the need for bonding is still there. So it's going to look
Hmm.
for that bonding. The more powerful the bond is at home, the loving vibe. You know, when I was in college, at some point I was failing out. You wouldn't believe it, but I was, yeah, I was, my parents came to, yeah, parents were, you know, from India, and they came here, totally didn't get this culture. I was alone going through it. I was the outsider. I couldn't rely on them to teach me. I got beat up on the school bus, you know, people holding me back in the back of in the school bus and giving me titty twisters and all, you know, like really giving me grundies on my head and beating me up
Oh, Dr.
and
Welge.
you know, yeah, you go through it. You know, you go through it as the outsider. Then you go into high school, you know, and I had to face the bully who kept bullying me on the bus every day. And one day I called him up after school and I said, you know what, I'm right here, come on down. I'm like a little shrimp, you know. This guy was like 10 times bigger than me. He said, oh yeah, I'm coming. He comes down on his skateboard and pow, you know, all I saw was stars and I'm out. But after that day, he saw that black guy when I got on that bus the next morning, and he never touched me after that. But you know, you go through and you deal with these situations, but when you're alone, it's so much harder. And I then went into a different crowd, and then they started using, and I started trying things. And I remember one day somebody gave me something to smoke, and it had this white color. And next thing I know, my whole body's paralyzed, and they're going through all my pants and taking my money. And I knew those weren't my real friends. So I learned the hard way, right? But they didn't like it after that when I stopped talking to them. Then I started doing well in tennis in school, of all things. I don't know how that happened. And suddenly all the people are hearing my voice every morning. You know, oh, Alex did this and this and this. You won this and this and this. And suddenly I'm finding a different group of friends. I go to college, and you know, I'm still pretty alone. I still don't know America. I still don't connect to people the way that I would want to. And so that inner need for bonding has not been satisfied. And suddenly I can buy friends and join a fraternity. And my brothers in my fraternity, Pi Lambda Phi, you know, they were, you know, we had a pastor, a rabbi, and a priest as the founders. So it was non-sectarian, and I suddenly had this group of friends, and holy crap, did the floodgates open. And I lost it. I got lost, and I was failing out of college. 1.2 GPA after 4 years. And my dad's like, you know, we're done. And now when that's what woke him up, was then I got a 1.2 GPA. And he's sitting back in his office, you know, he's done well in his schooling, but they had family. I looked at college as an escape to get away from my family that was having divorce as an issue. As you know, this world, as America, was a different paradigm, and my family wasn't handling that dynamic well. And my mom didn't have to put up with my dad's abuse, and the fighting started early. And I just wanted to get away from it, and I got into drugs to get away from it. But also, I found this avenue to bond with those people that I wanted to be a part of. I wanted to be part of something, the sense of being needed, being bonded. Now I'm sitting there failing. And so he comes up to me and he said, you know, this is not good enough. I put all this money, you know, at the end of the day, you might as well just stop doing this and just do normal work like most people. Maybe college isn't for you, you know? And I knew I was smarter than I was able to show on paper, and I didn't want to give up on myself. But he was there in my weakest time, and he was there for me. Even though he wasn't there for me emotionally, he wasn't there for me in any other way until that moment woke him up. And somehow he said, you know what, let me get you a therapist. And I remember Dr. Ferguson, and I remember that one first sentence he told me that just changed my life. And I had broken my arm, and he said, you know, the woman that's going to fall in love with you, Alex, is not going to care about that arm. And just the tears just started pouring out of me. The things that inside you, that the right person at the right time can give you that healing energy, and you can suddenly feel strength from somebody outside who understands you, who gets you, who gives you the feeling they care, right? And so I was missing this growing up in that tension-filled family. I got love in that moment, ultimately, when I was failing. Then I got some hope, and I said, you know what? I know I'm smarter than this. What do I have? I don't have any relationships. I'm failing out of college. I don't have a job. Dad's telling me he's going to be putting me out if I don't do something better. And he said, okay, I'm going to give you one more semester. If you can do better than the 1.2, I'll give you one more semester, but that's it. So I put my glasses on, got out of the frat house, got into a library, sat there, and tried my best, and I got to a 2.0, and I thought I had won the lottery the next semester, you know. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, holy crap, you know. But he said, okay, 2 is better than 1.2, yes, but this is still not good enough. And so he did this with me every semester, and by the end of another 4 years, I was on the dean's list. And in the process of this darkness, you see the light much clearer, right? You see it, because when you're people take for granted, but when you're depressed and you're in the darkness, you see the light. And so suddenly I started going to anything positive I could hook onto, whether it was jazz, it was hip hop. You know, I was just looking for music. It gave me energy. Then I found myself in a group of people called Students for Camp Heartland who helped children with HIV and AIDS. And this group of people just had so much light. And then I followed that energy, and then I started doing better. And eventually, as my grades got better, I said, okay, let me see if I can work now. And then I started adding that without taking away from putting my priority on my intelligence, as I thought that's where I could bank on. Then I started doing better in college, and I started getting a job, and that's how I met my first girlfriend eventually. I could finally handle a relationship. And so at the end of this snowball started happening, but it all started with that one sentence from Dr. Ferguson, in my darkest times. And then I followed that vibe, and ultimately going to Camp Heartland just changed my life, because suddenly I had been learning to try to be like my dad and be or my uncle who's a cardiologist and all this. And then I saw these children, and we created this amazing place. You have like 115 counselors with 300 children all struggling with HIV, AIDS, either they're directly affected or infected. It's taking 17 pills in the morning, you know. It just humbles you. And then those children all start singing camp songs, and the whole place just erupts in this beauty and this love. And then the people are just giving each other so much love. And we're just lifting that burden for 2 weeks. It's kind of sad because they only have 2 weeks with us, but they get to just be kids, and we're playing water guns, and we're just dancing, and we're playing all these games, and everyone's just loving, and that loving vibe was so healing, and I needed it so much. Yeah. Those kids gave me so much more than I could ever learn in a book, and I realized I want to follow that vibe, and now I'm here. I just follow that vibe. So
that's awesome.
You know,
that's awesome. And the importance of therapy, being divorced and wanting to make sure that, like I tell my boys, I am a woman. I cannot teach you how to be a man. I can support you. I can nurture you. I can be there for you. But here's a therapist that, can chit chat with you when you want to have conversations outside of what you talk to mom about. So I love, implementing therapy. It has really, really been huge and beneficial to my boys and me.
Absolutely. I think that's the key. Dr. Gabor Mate, as we mentioned, Ed, he always talks about the root of all addiction ultimately is some sort of pain, some challenge that the person is overwhelmed with, whether it's trauma, and they just couldn't figure out how to deal with that solution to that problem. And they found an easy way temporarily maybe to get some pleasure or get some relief. But instead of punishing them for the solution they came up with, helping them go through this part to really get to know who they are. how come you find yourself in a place, like this? What is it that you're still going through emotionally that you have not been able to figure out? And really getting to the root of it. Even in Portugal, where things are, they have a different approach, right? Instead of putting resources into enforcement, they're putting resources into prevention.
Don't try to crowbar.
I'm not going to bring it in now. No, we'll bring it some other time. But the point is that the emphasis going to healing the pain and figuring out what's the
Mhm.
pain and strengthening and helping the person with what they're going through. So the children are getting lost. They're going to have tons of problems. They're going to go through pain. But if you're there for them, you're going to figure it out together, and they're going to know that you're going to be able to help them through it.
Here's a thought about persuasion, magic, right? Like, because, so let's say you're this parent that watches from a side, sees 90%, only intervenes 10%, and you want to intervene, but you don't want to have to say everything. How do you create a right or left turn in the direction of your child without them necessarily hearing you say, this is where you make a right turn, right? And so I bring this topic, and I'm laughing to myself because I want to be provocative in how I describe it and just talk about like it's manipulating your kids, do what you want. But but it's the power of persuasion and magic that you kind of need to employ at times. And very basic example, like building on what I said about my kid and him being interested in being strong and eating food that helps him build muscle. That's easily expandable to why I want him to learn how to do upward dogs and downward dogs, because it's how you're going to build muscle. It's why he should be excited to go for a long walk and not complain about being tired, because going on the long walk, especially when your legs are hurting, is how you build muscle. And that's how you get strong. So I don't have to explicitly say every part of that. I could say it's like, oh man, all this walking is making me tired. The good news is I'm going to be so much stronger because of all the muscles that come from all this walking. And he's like, me too. Like, you know, like I'm kind of tricking him to have a direction of thinking that he was ambivalent about, and he didn't express it explicitly, but I inferred where he was going, and I said something in the affirmative instead of you should or you shouldn't, instead of in a command. I said it in an affirmative for me, and he was able to take it and run with it. And he does that over and over again. And I think that's something that is always available to parents with children. Like, let's say a child really likes to look a particular way. My son got into, for some reason, because it wasn't me, I got rid of all my denim. And he got into like jeans and denim. And like he found the one pair of jeans his mom got him and put it on himself. And he put on a shirt and he's all denimed out. And he looked real cute and fun. I was like, I don't know if he got that, but he's like, this is my new look. This is when I want to be cool. That's what he told his mother. That's what he wants to wear when he wants to be cool. I'm like, wow, now I know. That's what cool is for him. I could use that. I could use cool for many years, you know. And so it's persuasive kind of language and statements that you make about the world that he will start forging his path because of how you're building all the buildings and the mountains and geography. Like, you're not building the road. You just keep putting mountains in certain places where he has to go around them, and he has to, you know. So you know, I don't know how well developed this idea is in practice with parents and kids and stuff, but I just know that, magicians redirect us visually all the time. Comedians redirect us with audio all the time. these are magical things. Now, if you could
Mm.
make your kid laugh, you got your kid in the palm of your hands. That's a powerful connection. If your kid thinks the things you say are funny or witty, or your perspective is interesting, or whew, like you got them. That's a great thing. But that is persuasion. That is magic.
Mhm.
So looking to exercise those things with kids is probably underutilized, like, because it's out there for us. We know what they're into. We know what they like. Like, it's like if you had, just imagine you met a stranger and the first time you met them, they don't like you. But you have an opportunity to meet them again for the first time, unlimited number of times, where each time they meet you, you remember that you met them before, but they don't. Just like
Mm.
the movie Groundhog Day, you could keep fine tuning your
Mhm.
skill set. And you know that if you had unlimited time, you could get them to like you. You just have to understand what it is that they like and then be that. Persuasion. It's magic, right? The same person that didn't like you now likes you. Like, they're just
Mm.
unaware that you fine-tuned your presentation, right? So our kids,
Mhm.
they don't see it coming. Like, we know everything about them in the beginning.
Mhm.
So if we utilize that and we teach transparency, we keep learning. We don't act explicitly on everything we learn. We want to keep learning, right? We don't want to close that avenue, because that's exactly what happens when you start like mouthing off, right?
Yeah.
And then you want to be able to persuade them based not on what you think's important, but based on what
Mhm.
you know they think is important.
Mm.
If it's important for them to get on the varsity team this year, even though they're a sophomore, because it's really going to give them status, then you find a way to connect that to five other things that you know is important to them. And that's the manipulation, that's the persuasion. If they connect what they want to things that you're telling them they should be doing, that's how they get to do it.
Mm.
It's again, it's not easy. It's not like completely intuitive. It actually takes work. I gave only a few examples because that's only a few examples that I've figured out.
Mm.
I imagine that there's but I think there's a plethora, a wealth more there if we
Mhm.
really thought about it that way. And again, if when it comes from a place of love, you
Right.
you want to know more about them.
That's
You
it.
love them. You want them to succeed in their endeavors. Like, I don't
Mhm.
choose, like, my son has some other things that he's really into that I'm not highlighting the way I am the strength part. Like, I like that part, so I get to highlight the thing that he's into that I like.
Mhm.
And I de-emphasize the things that he might be into that I don't like by not connecting them to a bunch of other things that are important. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're really getting in there, right? And that love that draws you to understand their hopes, their dreams, their goals, their big ideas, their crazy ideas, their
Yeah, you want to
their
know weird little things about
that's
them. Because you
that's what it is. It's really that's the when the child is really you're really involved in their life. You really love them. You're really giving them that feeling that you want to be right there with them. You'll help them figure it out. We're gonna have fun going through it. Maybe we won't succeed. Who knows? Maybe we put all this energy into being on the varsity team, but we don't get there. We get to junior varsity. It's okay. We got through it. We went through it. It was fun, and we tried. But he and she knows that you were ready to be there, right there with them in the journey.
there's one technique I think like that's easy to teach, uh, and it's I think something that's relatively common in psychotherapy, because like there's always something that people don't want to talk about, and one of the most useful ways to conduct yourself with someone in therapy who has something that they don't want to talk about is to talk about it or without talking about it, right? Like there's something that happened that that led to a lot of anxiety you don't want to discuss. We could talk about all of that without talking about it. You don't have to talk about the event itself. We could talk about so many elements outside of that. It becomes so challenging for the person not to just say it. It also it makes it easier for them to just say it. So you could always try during a difficult time to talk. Like, I could tell that there's something on your mind and you don't want to tell me. And I get that. I wouldn't want to tell me either. I'll probably judge you and get mad. And I get it. But you know, when I've had trouble where I felt confused about something that I couldn't figure out, and you could talk about it that. But strategy of how to cope about it, like you know, I used to think that when I would get mad about something that happened between me and my boyfriend. I'm not saying something happened between you and your boyfriend. I'm just saying when that has happened for me, I found that brooding about it for 3 days actually was very good for me. You should try it. It's awesome. Like, you know, you can make joke. But the point is, you could just like you completely like out of the. I need to know your dirty details. It's not about that. It's about that I could tell you're going through something, and I'm going to show you a million ways that I know what it's like to go through something too. And that is going to be the thing that all of a sudden they're going to want to tell you. It's like, I told you I don't want to know. You know, like about that. It's, you know, and so you could disarm them. Like, you don't have to know. It's okay not to know the details, but to show that you're still there. It's almost like a test every time that happens with a kid. You know, they don't want to. It's okay. I understand. Why would you want to tell a guy like me? You know, no, I could tell a guy like you. It's just that this is you know, and they'll have an answer. You know, depending on their age or whatever. You know, but it just like, if you think of them almost as like, think about non-romantic flirting. It should always be like non-romantic flirting with our family and friends, like intellectually, uh, comedically, reference to the funny aunt or uncle. Like, there should always be something that reminds of why we're in this relationship. You know, that should be alive. You know, because otherwise, they're like, yeah, my mom or dad, but we're not that close. Like, that happens in a lot of families, or with siblings, or whatever. And sometimes that's just it happens, and it is what it is. But like, if you put an effort to not have it go that way, then you have like that resource for the difficult time, whatever those difficult times are.
Exactly.
Substance, or friends, or romance drama, or not getting into the program you wanted to get into and the university that you were pursuing. All that kind of heartache is so much more manageable when you have a network of relationships that grow your identity in something.
Amen. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Love that.
We started late. We went over. It's interesting. Like, as we were going, like, I got an additional request from Cynthia Joy. And if I hit accept, I wonder if that means one of us gets kicked out. So I just want to see what happens.
Let's try it.
Let's see. I'm going to say accept. Maybe she's already gone. So she was like, all right, you didn't accept me earlier. I'm out. All right. This was a great conversation. I thank you both very much.
I thank you both very much helping me.
And this whole
So
thing
thank you.
is another segment of addicted kids, concerned parents, and knocking construction in the back. So until next week.
Till next week, guys. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you both, doctors. Have a good day.
Bye.